the Arab peoples is invincible. The just cause of the Arab peoples is invincible. Article published in the newspaper Ziri Ipapulit. November 24, 1977. In recent days the problems of the Middle East have become an object of great interest for all international public opinion. The reason for this is the visit which the Egyptian president, Sadat, paid to Jerusalem and the talks which he held with Israeli Prime Minister, begin. Words about peace there are in plenty, but the real and just solution of the problems of the Middle East is not apparent on the horizon. Israel, that armed instrument of the political, economic and military interests of the American imperialists in the Middle East, is still keeping the Arab territories occupied. The Palestinians are still left without their homeland and the superpowers are still intriguing and interfering in the internal affairs of the peoples of that zone. Time after time, the enemies of the Arab peoples bring out with great publicity all sorts of plans and 1. The political events and problems of the Middle East and Comrade Enver Hoxha's have been extensively treated book, Reflections on the Middle East, published in Albanian and some foreign languages in 1984. 2. In November 1977. The Just Cause of the Arab Peoples. 187. Projects allegedly to solve the problems which are concerning the Middle East and to put an end to the Arab-Israeli conflict which has been going on for 30 years. A great deal of talk has been heard about these plans, Rogers or Kissinger plans, Gromyko or Vance plans, plans of sheiks and emissaries of UNO. But these plans have changed nothing and could not have done so. The aim of all of them has been to quell the liberation struggle of the Arab peoples, to compel them to relinquish their supreme national interests, to abandon the Palestinian people and leave them in the lurch, to capitulate to the blackmail of Israel and to submit completely and finally to foreign imperialist domination. The Arab peoples are well aware who their enemies are, know that the aggressors must be unmasked, isolated and fought. They know that Israel is a savage, insatiable aggressor against the Arab peoples, against their freedom and independence. On several occasions it has shed the blood of the fraternal Arab peoples, has occupied their territories and has kept them under continual threat of further expansion. Every day Israel is attacking, maiming and killing an ancient and glorious people, such as the fraternal Palestinian people, whom the Zionists, with the urging and support of the American imperialists, have left without homes or homeland. In flagrant violation of all historical, international and human justice, the Palestinian people have been forcibly driven from their homes, from the territories on which they were born and have lived for centuries, where they developed their lofty civilization from which the whole of mankind has benefited. Now they have been dispersed and are living the miserable life of refugees, as guests in the homes of their Arab brothers. Despite their suffering and fragmentation, the Palestinian people have retained all their fighting spirit and lofty national consciousness. They have never laid down their arms in the fight to gain their freedom, their rights, and their homeland. The heroic liberation struggle which the Palestinian people have always been waging will remain throughout history as a great example of those small peoples whom no enemy, however mighty, can intimidate, who, when it comes to defending their freedom and rights, are ready to make any sacrifice, to endure any suffering and hardship, however protracted and stern the fight may be. The Albanian people, who feel a close affinity with the Palestinian people and their struggle, nurture a sincere affection and great respect and admiration for this long-suffering, valiant people and have unwavering confidence in their final victory. Numerous efforts have been and are being made from various directions to bring about agreement and compromise with Israel, neglecting and violating the vital interests of the Arab peoples, especially the interests of the Palestinian and Syrian peoples. This is to be condemned and cannot be accepted either by the Arab peoples and their true friends, or by anybody to whom the freedom and independence of the peoples is dear. Our people, as close and loyal friends of the Arab peoples, consider these attempts to reach agreement as activity aimed against the interests of the Arabs, as pro-imperialist and further incitement to Israeli aggression. All progressive and patriotic Arab opinion, from the Palestinians, the Syrians, the Algerians, the Iraqis and the Libyans to the Egyptians, has expressed open opposition to agreement and compromise with Israel. Wise, all who are genuine fighters against American imperialism and Soviet social imperialism, who are opposed to reaction and oppression, all who are for the freedom of peoples and support their liberation struggle, have criticized and firmly condemned the agreements with the just cause of the Arab peoples. 189. Israel have adopted a clear-cut stand against any compromise with it. Contrary to this widespread healthy opinion, however, it is noticeable that at present the non-aligned forces are playing no role. They are keeping quiet and trying with difficulty to maneuver to get out of the difficult position in which the plan for agreement with Israel is putting them. What has happened to all those speeches and pledges about defending the rights of the Arab peoples and the Palestinians? What has happened to all those resolutions and decisions about the just settlement of the conflict in the Middle East, that opposition expressed from the tribunes of conferences to the imperialist interference in that zone? This silence on the part of those unrestrained lovers of empty talk is not accidental. The things that have occurred, the concrete events, the development of the class struggle have brought to light the falsity of theories or movements which are intended to quell revolutionary and liberation struggles and to deceive the peoples. This falsity is being revealed by the imperialists themselves who, when it comes to defending their own interests, do not worry at all about the difficult positions in which they place their friends. What can the theoreticians and supporters of the non-aligned movement say when the standard-bearers of non-alignment openly show themselves to be committed to and dependent on imperialism, that they are playing the imperialists' game? That the policy they pursue is independent formally, but in reality is dictated by others and defends interests alien to the Arab peoples? The non-aligned movement may still continue to exist in conferences, meetings and propaganda, but it has been dead since the time when, in the Middle East and the Ogaden Desert, in Angola and Zaire, it proved in 190. Capable of hiding the fact that many governments of countries which pose as non-aligned are linked with this or that big capitalist or imperialist power, that on many occasions they play the game of imperialism and defend its neo-colonialist and expansionist interests. Now it is incapable of covering up and justifying the interference, intrigues and maneuvers of the imperialist superpowers in many non-aligned countries with empty words, or concealing and justifying the pro-imperialist actions of many heads of these countries against liberation struggles. In connection with the agreement and compromise with Israel, there is no apparent activity of the so-called Third World either. We do not see the supporters of the theory of three worlds, who shout so loudly and try to prove with quotations that they unreservedly support the liberation struggles and defend the interests of peoples of the world, defending the just cause of the Arab peoples or coming out in their support. Why is this? Can it be that the interests and territories of the Arabs, the future and existence of the Palestinians, must be sacrificed for the sake of the alliance with the Second World and the United States of America? Or, perhaps, this is required by the supreme interests of imperialist superpowers which the small peoples and ordinary folk are quite unable to understand? The very embarrassing position of the supporters of the theory of three worlds, for whom the agreement and compromise with Israel has torn to shreds the scheme which links their worlds, is understandable. The question is simple: in whose favor is this agreement? In favor of the first world, the second or the third? Does it serve the liberation of peoples or national oppression, the anti-imperialist struggle or the quelling of this struggle? Their silence shows that this agreement cannot be used for their propaganda purposes, that in this case the just cause of the Arab slogans and theories are quite unable to alter the nature of the fact. Can the policy of the American imperialists which defends and supports their most aggressive satellite, Israel, be considered a non-aggressive policy, retreat? At the present time, aggressive war is being prepared step by step, through minor wars, by inciting separate aggressions and kindling local conflicts. If the American imperialists proclaim that they are allegedly for the status quo, this does not mean they have given up their aggressive and expansionist aims, but that the status quo serves their hegemonic aims to the detriment of the Arab peoples and in favor of the imperialist interests of the United States and its ally, Israel. We are against and condemn Carter's efforts to conceal his aggressive policy. Likewise, we are against the presentation of the American policy of the status quo not as aggressive, but as a defensive policy. The teeth of American imperialism have not yet fallen out, nor have its claws been clipped. To defend the policy of the status quo means to defend imperialist occupations, to defend the division of the world between great powers, defend neocolonialism and the exploitation of oppressed peoples by imperialism and all the other capitalist powers. To defend the status quo means to give your blessing to the occupation of the Arab territories by the Israelis and the violent expulsion of Palestinians from their homes, means to defend the military bases in foreign countries, the aggressive blocks of imperialism, the multinational monopoly companies and the whole imperialist system of oppression and exploitation. The Party of Labor of Albania and the Albanian people scornfully reject all the imperialist calculations. Our people have always been and are with the just cause of the Arab peoples and will be beside them in any situation, good or bad, in joys and victories, in grief and in temporary defeats. The Albanians are a small people, but for the peoples who are fighting for freedom and justice, such as the Arab peoples and the peoples of Africa, they are unwavering loyal brothers. The daily facts of international life show clearly that the general policy which the imperialist superpowers pursue has been constructed in conformity with their own selfish interests, each proceeding from the aim of establishing its hegemony more firmly and quickly over the peoples of all continents. Each of the imperialist superpowers, both when it has planted its claws deep in the flesh of the victim and when it has just taken the first steps in its expansion, struggles to impose its policy on other countries and groups of countries. The Soviet social imperialists are striving with all their might to deceive the leaders of various countries of Africa by hiding behind the mask of a socialist country and presenting themselves as champions of freedom. They sell these countries armaments and in return gain the right to establish military bases for their own interests of domination and to further extend their imperialist expansion. At the same time, another imperialist power, United States of America, is maneuvering through its agents, by means of credits, weapons and dollars, and leaving no stone unturned to trip up the Soviet social imperialists. There is no limit to the contest of superpowers for domination and hegemony. It recognizes no rules or morality. Deception and perfidy go hand in hand with crime and violence. The peoples, the various countries which become objects of the savage Soviet-American rivalry, fall victim to these dangerous games of superpowers. Now we see that Ethiopia and Somalia, whose freedom-loving and the just cause of the Arab peoples. 193. Peace-loving peoples, both with ancient cultures, and who have suffered every kind of horror at the hands of the Italian colonialist occupiers, have gone to war with and are killing one another. Do these peoples want this war which causes them so much suffering and misery? Not at all. Could they settle the disagreements which exist between them without the need to fight against and slaughter one another? Of course, they have possibilities to settle these disagreements by finding the most suitable ways. Then, why are they fighting? It is clear that others, the imperialist powers and superpowers, have driven these peoples to war for their own hegemonic and predatory interests. Meanwhile, as the blood of these unhappy peoples is being shed in torrents and the hatred between them mounts, there are imperialist and capitalist powers which sometimes take one side, sometimes the other, sometimes applaud one country, sometimes the other, without making the slightest gesture to help these long-suffering peoples gain peace and the possibility to build their own lives in complete freedom and independence. The policy of the Party of Labour of Albania has always been in support of the national liberation struggle of the peoples, in defense of their interests. It has always been open and principled. As was pointed out at the 7th Congress of the PLA, our party thinks that we should speak openly to the peoples about the situation because this is the only way to assist their true unity, the unity of truly anti-imperialist and progressive states and governments. In order to unite the peoples in the struggle for freedom, independence and social progress, against every kind of oppression and exploitation by anyone, first of all, the demarcation line must be laid down, it must be made clear who their main enemy is, against whom they must fight and with whom they should unite. 100. The peoples must guard against the intrigues of the imperialists, the history of liberation and the peoples must guard against the intrigues of the imperialist superpowers, who come out as friends and benefactors, but whose true aim is to dominate and lay the basis for the establishment of their hegemony. This is occurring in Angola, in Zaire and elsewhere. This has been going on for a long time in the Middle East, too, with the drama which is being played with the fate of the Arab peoples, in which the imperialist superpowers are pulling all the strings, alternating with one another, in order to fulfill their expansionist exploiting ambitions. The history of liberation and revolutionary struggles and the practice of day-to-day international life teaches us that the enemies must not be left in peace so that they have time to come to agreement, to group their forces, and organize themselves in the struggle against the peoples. We are fully confident that all those who are oppressed and suffering at the hands of the imperialists and reaction, all those who want the freedom and independence of their countries, will mobilize themselves still more in order to expose the plans and aims of the imperialist superpowers to strangle the revolution and enslave the peoples, and will further enhance their revolutionary struggle to resist and conquer the enemies. From the newspaper Ziri I Populate, November 24, 1977.